On what seemed like a peaceful flight, Olivia Bennett, an influential Black CEO known for her calm demeanor and humility, suddenly became the target of blatant disregard and racism. Karen Whitfield, a wealthy and arrogant mother, demanded that Olivia vacate her premium seat to make room for her daughter, as if her position and skin color automatically gave her the right to command others. But things quickly spiraled out of Karen's control when the head flight attendant publicly defended Olivia in front of all the passengers, leaving Karen embarrassed and furious. This moment wasn't just a confrontation between two women, it was a battle between arrogance and self-respect, between toxic prejudice and the core values of fairness that needed to be protected more than ever. Olivia was no stranger to curious and admiring looks whenever she appeared at international conferences or on the covers of prestigious magazines. But today, she chose simplicity, wearing only a modest business suit and elegant glasses to avoid drawing attention. Few knew that the calm and humble woman stepping onto the plane was in fact the famous CEO of Bennett International, a leading tech firm headquartered in New York. Often featured on lists of the most powerful women in America, Olivia had booked a first-class seat not only for comfort, but because she needed to prepare thoroughly for an important strategic meeting in Chicago just a few hours later. Seat 1A, the one she carefully selected, was in the perfect position for her to work undisturbed. Once settled in, Olivia opened her laptop, focusing on the financial data waiting to be processed. But not long after, a voice full of arrogance interrupted the quiet atmosphere of first class. "Excuse me, you'll have to move. My daughter needs to sit here." Olivia gently looked up. Standing before her was a white woman, about 45 years old, draped in expensive jewelry, designer glasses perched atop her perfectly styled blonde hair. It was Karen Whitfield, her face cold and filled with contempt, staring directly at Olivia as though she didn't even exist. "I'm sorry, this is my seat," Olivia replied politely and calmly, keeping her voice soft but firm. Karen furrowed her brow, seemingly unfamiliar with being denied. She turned and placed her hand on the shoulder of her 8-year-old daughter standing beside her, shooting a reproachful look at Olivia. "I'll say it again. My daughter gets anxious on planes. She has to sit by the window. I'm sure you can sit somewhere else." Olivia looked at the girl who had her head down, clearly uncomfortable with her mother's behavior. Olivia smiled gently. "I'm sorry your daughter feels uneasy, but I've booked this seat. If you need assistance, the flight attendants can help you find another solution." Karen's face flushed red with anger, her frustration clearly visible in her perfectly made-up features. She leaned down close to Olivia, lowering her voice threateningly, but still loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. "Don't you get it? You think someone like you should sit here?" That pointed remark instantly silenced the entire first-class cabin. Curious eyes began to focus on Olivia, some sympathetic, others skeptical. In that moment, Olivia could clearly feel the anger rise within her, but she quickly regained her composure, reminding herself not to lose control. She adjusted her glasses, her voice steady as if nothing had happened. "I think I understand what you're saying, but I'm sorry, I won't be moving. You can ask the flight attendant for assistance." Karen's face turned bright red with fury and embarrassment. She snatched her Louis Vuitton handbag and spun around to face the young flight attendant who had just approached. "Hey, I demand you handle this immediately. I can't believe this airline is letting someone like her disrupt me and my daughter on this flight." The young attendant hesitated briefly, casting an apologetic glance at Olivia before turning to Karen with professionalism and firm resolve. "Ma'am, I'll check your seat information. Please wait a moment." Karen nodded arrogantly, certain she would get her way. Meanwhile, Olivia calmly leaned back in her seat, taking a deep breath to regain her composure. Her gaze drifted out the window, silently thinking that the woman before her could never imagine who she was actually challenging. Olivia remained silent, maintaining her usual calm facade. No one in the cabin realized that the black woman sitting there was Olivia Bennett, the powerful CEO of one of the largest corporations in the United States. And this was just the beginning of what was to unfold. A story that Karen Whitfield, with all her arrogance and prejudice, would never forget for the rest of her life. While Olivia remained silently staring out the window, Karen stood in the aisle of the first-class cabin, arms crossed defiantly, her arrogant gaze fixed on the young flight attendant. The tense silence enveloped the cabin, and whispers began to ripple through the passengers as they exchanged curious glances, waiting to see how this confrontation would be resolved. Realizing that the situation had escalated beyond her ability to manage, the young flight attendant quickly called Emily Turner, the head flight attendant of the flight, to handle the matter. Emily approached with confidence, grace, and professionalism, her perfect uniform accentuating her serious and authoritative presence. With years of experience handling difficult situations on flights, she knew this issue needed to be resolved quickly and fairly. "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm Emily Turner, the head flight attendant. How can I assist you?" Emily spoke gently, her voice clear but carrying a firm resolve. Karen immediately turned her displeased gaze toward Emily, lifting her chin in a haughty manner. "Well, this woman," Karen deliberately emphasized the words with a disdainful tone, glancing quickly at Olivia, who sat calmly in her seat, "refuses to give up her seat for my daughter, despite me explaining that she suffers from anxiety while flying. I asked her to switch, but she refused to cooperate. I want you to handle this immediately." Emily glanced briefly at Olivia and immediately noticed the calmness and poise in her eyes. She turned back to Karen, still maintaining a polite expression, and asked, "May I please check both of your tickets to clarify the situation?" Karen reluctantly handed over the electronic ticket, still wearing a scowl and clearly upset at having to prove anything. Emily carefully examined the details on both tickets, then glanced at Olivia once more, her eyes silently saying, "I apologize for the inconvenience." Then Emily looked directly at Karen, her voice firm and clear. "Miss Whitfield, after reviewing the information, I've confirmed that this guest, Miss Bennett, has properly booked seat 1A according to the airline's procedure. You and your daughter, in fact, booked seats 3 and 3C. Therefore, requesting Miss Bennett to give up her seat is unreasonable, and we cannot force a passenger to change a confirmed seat." Emily's clear professional words made Karen's face flush with anger. Her eyes flashed with surprise, mixed with confusion, as she seemed unaccustomed to being rejected so bluntly in front of an audience. She lowered her voice in frustration, trying to maintain some dignity under the watchful eyes of the surrounding passengers. "You don't understand. My daughter has psychological issues when flying. I'm just trying to help her. Can't you be flexible? Isn't your airline supposed to prioritize customer satisfaction?" Emily responded gently but decisively, her voice unwavering. "Of course, we always strive to assist all passengers to the best of our ability. However, our airline's policy is to protect the rights of passengers based on their confirmed seat assignments. If you were aware of your daughter's condition, you could have booked a window seat in advance, rather than asking another passenger to change their seat just before the flight departs." A few murmurs of agreement rippled from the other passengers, which only made Karen's face darken further. She glared at Olivia in fury, but Olivia only returned a composed and silent stare. For the first time, Karen felt a sharp discomfort rise within her, a feeling of helplessness that came from realizing she could not manipulate others with her wealth and power, as she had always done before. Finally, Karen reluctantly turned around, grabbing her daughter's hand and heading toward the originally assigned seats. She shot Emily a quick, angry glance, her eyes full of implied threats. "I won't forget this. I'll make sure to deal with this appropriately." Emily simply smiled politely, fully ignoring the baseless threat. Once Karen walked away, Emily turned to Olivia, bowed her head slightly and softly said, "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, Miss Bennett. The flight is still long, so if you need anything else, please don't hesitate to let me know." Olivia smiled gently and responded, "Thank you, Emily. You did a great job." Emily nodded softly and walked away. Olivia turned back to the window, taking a deep breath and quickly refocusing on her work. But deep down, she knew this flight was just the beginning of a series of much more intense events. That woman, Karen Whitfield, would not easily let this go. The white clouds outside drifted gently past the window, but Olivia understood that more storms lay ahead, and she was ready to face them all. The plane gently touched down at O'Hare International Airport, its wheels making a soft sound as they met the runway, pulling Olivia back to reality. She slowly closed her laptop, taking a deep breath as she prepared herself for the important meeting tomorrow morning. The signing of a multi-million-dollar strategic contract with Davenport Financial, Chicago's top financial firm. As Olivia calmly walked off the plane, In another corner of the airport, Karen Whitfield hurried outside, her steps quick as if trying to rid herself of the frustration and humiliation from their encounter. Karen's face was still flushed with anger, her eyes sparking as she recalled the embarrassment she had suffered in front of the passengers. For someone like Karen, who prided herself on her superiority, being publicly rejected by a stranger and corrected by the flight attendant felt like an unthinkable humiliation. A luxurious limousine awaited Karen, ready to take her back to her expensive penthouse in downtown Chicago. As she entered her home, she threw her Louis Vuitton bag onto the sofa, her voice rising with anger as it echoed through the room, causing her young daughter to freeze by the door. I can't believe this. Who gave her the right? A woman like that dares to refuse my request. It's ridiculous. Karen threw herself onto the sofa, rubbing her temples as she tried to dispel the disappointment and rage gnawing at her. After a moment, she reached for her phone and opened a message from the Davenport Financial Executive Team, a note from Chairman Richard Davenport announcing an important meeting tomorrow morning with a new client that promised to secure the largest contract in the company's history. Karen, as the senior HR director at Davenport Financial, held considerable power. Her eyes narrowed as a thought of revenge flickered in her mind. She knew her influence at Davenport, especially when it came to evaluating new projects related to personnel and company culture. She whispered to herself, whoever this new partner is tomorrow, they'll face major obstacles from me. A cunning plan began forming in her mind. If I can't make her suffer on that flight, at least I'll make someone pay at tomorrow's meeting. Davenport is my territory, and I won't let anyone outshine me again. Karen opened her laptop, searching for details about tomorrow's meeting, but the message was vague, stating only that the client was extremely important and their identity would be kept secret until the last moment for security reasons. The lack of specifics frustrated Karen, but she knew the key people attending. She decided to message Elizabeth Wells, Davenport's COO, and her longtime trusted friend. Elizabeth, do you know details about tomorrow's secret client? I need to prepare HR materials. Any information would help. Less than a minute later, Elizabeth replied, Chairman Davenport hasn't disclosed specifics, but he said this client is very special. The contract could change Davenport's strategy. Be in the meeting room on time tomorrow. Richard will provide all details. Karen frowned. The mystery surrounding the client only added to her frustration, but also sparked her determination. No matter how powerful this client is, she thought, I'll find a way to control the situation to my advantage. Meanwhile, Olivia Bennett stepped gracefully out of O'Hare Airport and headed straight toward the sleek black car waiting outside. The driver greeted her politely. Welcome to Chicago, Miss Bennett. The hotel and meeting preparations are ready as requested. Olivia nodded gently as the car merged into Chicago's busy downtown traffic. She looked out the window at the glittering city lights, her smile soft but contemplative. Deep down, she knew tomorrow would bring more than just contract negotiations. She might face tense interactions with difficult personalities, something she'd grown familiar with over her years in business. Yet Olivia wasn't afraid. She had overcome countless prejudices and challenges to reach where she was today. Calm, strong, and smart had become her personal brand. She was confident that no matter who that arrogant woman from the flight was, or how powerful she might be, Olivia was ready. What Olivia didn't know was that at Davenport Financial, someone was already plotting to sabotage the mystery client they were about to meet. And that person was none other than Karen Whitfield, the same woman who had just clashed with her on the plane hours earlier. Ironically, Karen had no idea that the secret client she was plotting against was Olivia Bennett herself, the very woman she had tried to humiliate on the flight. Their fateful meeting awaited, bringing surprises neither could predict. The next morning, golden sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Davenport Financial's executive meeting room in Chicago's business district. The murmur of senior leaders gradually quieted as the clock struck 9:00 a.m. Karen Whitfield, dressed in an impeccably tailored designer suit, sat confidently in her designated seat as HR director, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently on the polished mahogany table. When the door opened, Chairman Richard Davenport entered with his characteristic charismatic smile, followed by COO Elizabeth Wells. But Karen's rehearsed greeting died in her throat when the third person entered, Olivia Bennett walked in with the effortless elegance of a seasoned CEO, her sharp gaze immediately locking onto Karen's stunned expression. "Good morning, everyone," Olivia's calm yet commanding voice filled the room. "I'm Olivia Bennett, CEO of Bennett International. It's a pleasure to formally meet Davenport Financial's leadership team." The blood drained from Karen's face. Her perfectly crafted HR binder slipped from her trembling hands, papers scattering across the table as the room erupted in polite applause. Richard Davenport's enthusiastic handshake with Olivia confirmed this wasn't some cruel coincidence. The woman Karen had tried to bully on the plane was the legendary tech CEO they'd been courting for months. As Olivia began her presentation on strategic partnership opportunities, Karen desperately tried to regain composure. When Olivia highlighted Bennett International's commitment to workplace equality, Karen saw her opening. "These diversity initiatives sound lovely in theory," Karen interjected with saccharine condescension. "But how would you handle resistance from traditionalists who see this as unnecessary disruption?" The room tensed. Olivia didn't flinch. "Progress isn't about forcing change, Miss Whitfield," Olivia countered, her eyes never leaving Karen's, "but demonstrating how inclusion strengthens profitability. Our data shows diverse teams outperform homogeneous ones by 35%. I'd be happy to review the metrics with you." A faint smirk played on Elizabeth Wells's lips as Karen's nostrils flared. When Karen attempted another barb about unrealistic expectations, Richard Davenport cut in. "Actually, Karen, these are exactly the reforms our board has been advocating. Perhaps you could share how HR plans to implement Miss Bennett's suggestions?" The tables had turned spectacularly. For the remainder of the meeting, Karen sat rigidly while Olivia commanded the room, her occasional glances at Karen carrying the unspoken message: "You picked the wrong opponent." By midday, the partnership papers were signed. As attendees mingled over coffee, Karen fled to her office, slamming the door hard enough to rattle her framed credentials. She gripped the edge of her desk, replaying every humiliating moment, the way junior analysts had clustered around Olivia, how Richard had openly praised her refreshing perspective. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. "Boardroom in 10, post-meeting debrief." Karen's stomach dropped. She knew what this meant. The same tactics that had cemented her power at Davenport, the whispered rumors, the strategic exclusion, had just spectacularly backfired. As she straightened her blazer with shaky hands, a terrifying realization dawned. In trying to destroy Olivia, she might have just ended her own career. Down the hall, Olivia accepted congratulations with graceful humility. But when Elizabeth discreetly mentioned addressing the HR situation, Olivia shook her head. "People like Karen Whitfield aren't the real problem," she murmured. "It's the systems that empower them. Let's focus on building better ones." The look of respect in Elizabeth's eyes confirmed what the morning had proven. True power doesn't demand obedience. It inspires allegiance. And as Olivia Bennett would demonstrate in the coming months, that kind of power changes everything. The morning sun cast long shadows across Davenport Financial's executive floor as Karen Whitfield marched toward the boardroom, her Prada heels clicking like a ticking time bomb. She'd rehearsed this confrontation all night, every possible scenario, every counterargument, but nothing could prepare her for what awaited behind the frosted glass doors. The room fell silent as she entered. Seated around the gleaming conference table were not just the board members, but Olivia Bennett at Richard Davenport's right hand, and Karen's stomach dropped. Emily Turner, the flight attendant, flipping through a familiar-looking incident report. "Ah, Karen," Richard said, steepling his fingers. "We were just reviewing Bennett International's final partnership proposal. There's just one complication we need to address first." Olivia met Karen's gaze without blinking, her manicured hands resting calmly on a leather-bound folder. Karen's pulse pounded in her ears as she noticed the label. HR policy violations. Whitfield case. Elizabeth Wells tapped a key, and the massive LED screen lit up with security footage from the plane. Karen watched her own pixelated self sneer. "You think someone like you should sit here?" In horrifying high definition. "This," Olivia said quietly, "is why we're adding Clause 7.3 to our agreement." She slid a document across the table. Mandatory unconscious bias training for all Davenport executives, starting immediately. Karen's laugh came out shrill. You can't be serious. One personal disagreement, and you want to— Not one, Emily interrupted. She placed a stack of passenger complaints on the table. 12 documented incidents just this year. All first-class passengers. All— She glanced at the reports. Not white. The blood drained from Karen's face as Richard sighed. Karen, we've received some disturbing HR complaints too. Promotions blocked, salaries capped, all following the same pattern. Olivia opened her folder, revealing emails Karen had sent from her Davenport account. Your culture fit comments make fascinating reading, she said mildly, especially when cross-referenced with promotion data. Karen's office, once a sanctuary of power, now felt like a cage. She stared at the resignation letter on her desk, the mutually agreed departure that would vanish her from Davenport's history. A knock. Olivia leaned in the doorway holding 2 coffees. May I? What do you want? Karen spat. Here to gloat? Olivia set down a cup. To offer you a choice. She placed a business card next to it. Dr. Eleanor Grayson, diversity consultant. You're joking. Your tactics are outdated, Karen, but your instincts— Olivia tapped the card, sharp enough to help companies avoid lawsuits like the one Davenport would face if I leaked those emails. Karen's hand trembled as she picked up the card. Why would you? Because real change, Olivia said, heading for the door, requires converting opponents, not just crushing them. The coffee's black, just how you took it on the plane. As the door clicked shut, Karen stared at the card through sudden, unexpected tears. Outside her window, Chicago glittered indifferently. Somewhere in that skyline, Olivia Bennett was already moving on to her next victory. And Karen Whitfield? For the first time in her career, she had absolutely no idea who she was. 6 months later, the ballroom of Chicago's Peninsula Hotel buzzed with energy. The Corporate Equality Summit banner glittered above the stage where a transformed Karen Whitfield adjusted her headset mic. Gone were the designer labels. She now wore a simple navy pantsuit, her blonde hair pulled into a no-nonsense ponytail. Let me be clear, her voice rang out. What we call culture fit is often just coded discrimination. The audience of HR professionals leaned forward as she clicked to a slide showing Davenport's old promotion charts. I know, because I built these biased systems myself. In the front row, Olivia watched with quiet approval. Beside her, Richard Davenport whispered, You were right about her. She's become our most effective diversity trainer. On stage, Karen locked eyes with Olivia. Change begins when we confront our own complicity. A beat, even if it takes a very persistent woman in seat 1A to show us the way. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. As Karen stepped off stage, Olivia handed her a boarding pass, first class to their joint presentation at the UN Global Compact. Old habits die hard, Olivia smiled. But I think you've earned this seat. Karen's fingers brushed the embossed paper. Only if we're sitting together. The private elevator to Bennett International's executive floor required both women's key cards now. As partners in the new Global Equity Initiative, their days were filled with boardroom battles of a different sort. Pfizer's resisting the pay transparency measures, Karen said, scrolling her tablet as they walked to the morning meeting. Olivia smirked. Then let's have you take point. Nothing terrifies old boys clubs more than a reformed queen bee. Their team waited in the glass-walled conference room, a rainbow coalition of young analysts Karen would have once dismissed as diversity hires. Now she high-fived Jamal from analytics and complimented Mei Ling's presentation deck. Status report, Olivia called, and the room snapped to attention. As project updates flowed, Karen caught her reflection in the smart glass, still perfectly polished but softer somehow. The realization hit her. She was happy. Not the brittle triumph of climbing over others, but the steady warmth of building something worthwhile. The airplane cabin hummed at 30,000 feet as Olivia and Karen worked side by side, their laptops glowing with merger plans that would create the most inclusive financial tech platform in the industry. Karen suddenly laughed, pointing at Olivia's screen. You still use that ancient spreadsheet template? Some systems, Olivia said pointedly, are worth keeping. The flight attendant approached. a young black woman with cornrows and a confident smile. Ms. Bennett, we have that Darjeeling you prefer. She turned to Karen. And your usual espresso, Ms. Whitfield? As the attendant retreated, Karen raised an eyebrow. You trained them to remember our drinks? No, Olivia sipped her tea. I just made sure they're paid enough to care. She nodded toward the cockpit. That's Captain Rodriguez up front. Flew cargo for 8 years before we sponsored her commercial training. The plane banked gently, sunlight streaming through the windows. Karen leaned back, watching clouds drift past. No frantic scheming, no status anxiety, just the quiet certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Somewhere over the Atlantic, between discussing mentorship programs and debating blockchain ethics, the last of Karen's defenses finally crumbled. She touched Olivia's arm. Thank you, she said simply. Olivia just smiled and returned to her work. But as the plane soared through the stratosphere, Karen noticed she hadn't pulled away. 5 years later, the Bennett-Whitfield Diversity and Leadership Index became the industry standard. Their former Davenport colleagues still tell the legend, how the woman who nearly destroyed the deal became its most passionate architect. And if you fly first class on certain airlines, you might spot 2 silver-haired women in adjacent seats, bickering good-naturedly over spreadsheets. The flight crew knows to bring Darjeeling for Dr. Bennett and espresso for Professor Whitfield. They know not to fuss over them, and they know from the orientation videos every new hire watches exactly who these women are and what happened on that fateful flight so long ago, but that's a story for another journey.